everybody, what's up? Welcome to the video. I'm Brian K, and today we're going to be talking about some Stevie Ray Vaughan technique, how to pull that into your playing, things you can do to kind of get that in the spirit of Stevie Ray, you know. And I'm using my guitar here that is set up specifically for the Stevie Ray type of thing. And, you know, we'll go through the motions, let you hear the guitar, and I'll tell you about the setup specs with the guitar, and we'll get into some techniques and things that you can pull into your playing to start doing the Stevie Ray on your own. But before we get into it, I do want to thank everybody who has subscribed, you know, to the channel. It really does help the channel continue to grow, and it's tremendous the response I've had out here on Rumble and on YouTube. And of course, if you dig this kind of content and you'd like to help me keep bringing it out here, like, share, subscribe to the channel. It really does go a long way to help me continue to grow this channel. Check the links in my description for some other ways as well that you can help support me out here. And with that said, let's get into the video, okay? Now, Stevie's technique, I think, was obviously dictated a lot by how he had his guitar set up. And as we've all heard the stories, and, you know, very high action, very heavy strings, right? Okay, so, and he played pretty much through a pretty clean amp as well. And I'm going through a Fender amp. I'll also go through my settings on the amp I'm using. And I'll put that right up here so you can see that right now as we're getting to talking about how you maybe like, how you like to have your guitar set up. First off, to get into the Stevie vibe, right? Okay, well, Stevie used to play with very heavy strings. They say he had a 13 on the high E, and I think maybe down to like a 54 or something on the low E string, which is a pretty heavy string gauge. Okay, and he had his action jacked up pretty high. But and towards the end though, no, he did come down in string gauge, and he did move pretty much to like an 11 gauge set, like an 11 gauge set with some heavier bottom strings. Now, how I have this guitar set up is with 11 through 48. Okay, so it's an 11 gauge D'Addario XLs, right? You know, nickel plated, you know, or nickel wound, you know, regular electric gauge that way, 11s. Okay, and I have the action not super low, but it's not super high either. Okay, right at about 2 millimeters. Okay, so it gives you a little bit to press back on, you know, your fingers. So it gives you some resistance, but it's not so high that, you know, you're going to be taking skin off trying to go ahead and do a string bend or something, right? And in true Stevie fashion, you know, I have the bridge on this. The bridge is decked. Okay, it's not floating. I could certainly float it with this gauge, but it's decked with 4 springs. Okay, 4 springs in the back with the claw tightened up, keeping it down on the bridge so that the bridge is not moving. I could use the whammy bar for a dive if I wanted to. It's not so tight I can't use it, but it's not floating. Okay, so, all right, heavier string gauge, right? Not so low, but not so high, enough to give you a little resistance, and the bridge decked, right? Also, this guitar has straight up old school 62 type pickups, right? It's basically, this guitar is basically a 62 reissue, okay? But I do have custom wound pickups in here from Reggea that are wound to the specs of like an early 60s Fender pickup. Almaco magnets, you know, the Gary Bottoms, all that, all period correct, right? And then definitely got that sound, as we'll hear in a minute, because I'll go through the motions with the guitar, okay? 7 1/4 radius, you know, traditional old school Fender specs, okay? And this is a 62 reissue neck Corona era Fender back in the mid 80s, back when folks who worked for Leo acquired the company back from CBS, and they started going back to the iconic designs that made them popular in the first place. That's where this neck comes from. And, you know, basically a parts caster, though. It's not a vintage, you know, Corona era guitar. Okay, the body is just it's an ash body, so, you know, it's not older. It's a piece of swamp ash. It's a nice light body, and it has a pretty good wood grain to it. when I got the guitar, I finished it myself with teak oil. You know, I don't know what the finish was. It was probably, though, a sunburst looking at the grain. It's got some good grain. So this was most likely a sunburst back when it did have a finish. Okay. And, you know, 5-way selector switch. Okay, so that's the guitar. Okay. And now let's get into some of the things, right? The Stevie-isms is what I'll call them. You know, Stevie Ray's technique was certainly influenced by the way he has guitar set up. And this guitar is definitely in the realm of Stevie-ish setup. You know, higher action in the whole thing. So, and traditional Fender spec, you know, pickups and all that. All right, to get that traditional Fender Strat sound, right? Now, one of the things that comes with heavier strings is that it's a little harder to bend strings, and not that Stevie had any issues bending, because he could bend strings quite nicely and heavily, right? But when he would do his double stops, a lot of the time, you know, he kind of had like a, kind of almost reminds me almost like of, right, kind of like not super heavy bends. Kind of like T-Bone, you know, like he had a guitar with heavy strings, and if you ever listen to like T-Bone Walker bending strings, it was kind of like they weren't really even almost a half bend, they were almost kind of like a quarter bend. And you hear that kind of thing with a lot of Stevie's double stops, right? Right? Kind of quarter bendy, kind of herky-jerky sounding a little bit. Right? Kind of like T-Bone in that respect. And you know, so you have the strings with the higher action kind of giving you some resistance back into being able to bend the string, so it fights you a little bit. And to do the Stevie type of thing, you want to, not always, but when you start getting into things, right, you put a little bit on it. Right, and then all of a sudden you're kind of more in that Stevie sound of things, like when he would get going on a solo. He wasn't always being very gingerly unless he was using that dynamic, you know. Right, but you get a little bit, is with the guitar and the action set this way, no float on the bridge, decked bridge and the whole thing, higher action, bigger strings. The guitar responds really nicely, you know, if you want to go ahead and manhandle it a little bit, basically, right? So it gives you a good response, okay? So, okay, put a little bit on it, right? If you're going to do some double stops, don't worry about trying to do heavy bends with them. Kind of like that quarter to a half step bend on anything with a double stop. Right? Get you into that kind of Stevie Ray type of vocabulary with the double stops and the scale. All right? So let's go through what the guitar sounds like. Now, it's set pretty darn clean, okay? It's got a touch of breakup like Stevie would have. So if you start really smacking it, right, you're going to get a little bit of breakup. But if you come down, right, it's going to be nice and clean, right? So here's the bridge pickup on this guitar, right? Pretty pristine, pretty bright, right? Okay, right? The quack tone, right, position 2. Right now we're on the bridge and the middle pickup, right? Okay, middle pickup, right? All right, quack tone number 2, position number 4, where you got the middle and the bass pickup, right? The neck pickup. Right, and a nice fat tone coming out on the neck pickup. Okay, so the way that the guitar plays with a little bit of a higher action, heavier string, gives you the response, at least this is what I've found, right? It gives it the response to kind of get into that Stevie Ray Texas blues frame of mind, where you need to fight the guitar just a touch, right? To really kind of get that sound, because there's really no other way to get a Stevie Ray inspired type of thing happening on your guitar unless it's kind of fighting you a little bit. So I'll go through the motions, give you some audio examples so that you can hear the guitar in action, right? And let's check it out. Okay, so as we can hear, having the heavier strings, having a slightly higher than low action, like a medium high action, right? Deck the bridge, right? Totally old school Strat settings and old school, Strat setup on the guitar and settings on the amp. Get you into that Stevie realm, okay? So, thanks for stopping by today, and until next time, enjoy playing your guitar. Peace.